Good afternoon to all of you. I know it is very difficult to address the hungry stomach. If it is hungry mind, then my work is easy. But when you are hungry in your stomach, it will be very difficult. But we don't have any other option. Uh, if I recapitulate what we have discussed in the last class, we are talking about the theories of different theories, which has helped us in understanding the organic evolution. In that, we have studied about abiogenesis, biogenesis, and then lately we are discussing about the theory that has been proposed by the Lamarck. Um, Use, disuse, and all those things. Though the Lamarckian theory may not be the theory which can explain the organic evolution to the fullest extent possible, certainly it is the beginning which has ignited the curiosity in the minds of the scientists to think about the organic evolution. So, this has become the influential theory for other evolutionary biologists to think about the evolution and come out with more agreeable theories. So we will continue with this, and then we will also look into the other theories. Uh, so now the Lamarck theory, which all of you know that even today, what Lamarck has proposed is not totally refuted. Though there are certain features which may not be agreeable to us because of the present modern knowledge that we have, but still then there are few principles of Lamarck which cannot be reputed even today also. But in the very beginning, when Lamarck proposed, until decades, for 1 or 2 decades, nobody refuted it. All of them agreed what Lamarck has suggested. But our idea about evolution changed with the discovery of genes, and which are the units of heredity. So that's why then people started thinking that um, any organism cannot afford to show any evolution in its lifespan because you cannot alter the genes. And we know that now the genes, which are the units of heredity, are responsible for all our characters. And suppose, and within the genes also, we have understood there are uh, two types, that is somatic and germ. Uh, the one which are responsible for our external appearance, and the one which are contributing in the process of reproduction. So because of all these modern knowledge of genes, even the genetics and molecular biology, uh, with the development of these fields in the science, people started questioning the Lamarck's theory. Lamarck, of course, uh, in his theory, he has proposed the use and disuse. The one which is used extensively, continuously, will grow stronger. So he gave the example of a giraffe, because originally the giraffes were short necked. Because of the scarcity of the food on the ground, they have to change their feeding habit from browsing to collecting the leaves from the tree tops. So for that, they have to raise their forelimbs and stretch their neck. So as a result of this, present day giraffes are having very long neck. Even the fossils also shows that the ancestors of giraffes were short necked, and present day giraffe long neck is because of continuous stretching. So there also this the Lamarck suggested even the legs of the crabs. They have also said the legs, there was no pedipalp, and over a period of time, to catch the prey, they thought that if their two limbs, two limbs, if they are modified, that will be of much use to them. So, over a period of time, the present day crabs are having such a long pedipalp to collect the uh, or to catch the prey. So, these are some of the examples that has been suggested. And so, based on this, he suggested the acquired traits gets passed on from one generation to another generation. And but what is people started questioning? Another example nowadays, if you want to suppose if both the father and mother, if they are enjoying bike riding and if they become very proficient, their son need not learn the bike driving because these characters are going to be inherited by birth. He will have this skill of bike driving, but uh, and the same example, if see there are two people, if you know, if your parents know cycling, then you need not learn. As for this um, inheritance of acquired character is concerned, because all of you know the cycling is a skill that you have learned it. And if your father, maybe if your father and mother parents may be knowing that, but you have to learn it again. So that means uh, this particularly the principle of inheritance of acquired character was totally refuted, because the acquired characters cannot be passed from parents to offsprings or from one generation to another generation. So then again, if you are an athlete, there is no guarantee that your children are going to become an athlete. So this is um, the main refutation for this Lamarck's theory. Lamarck also believed that spontaneous generation of trait was an ongoing process, and that was a purpose driven. He suggested that the evolution is a purpose driven. There's a purpose. He said that uh, the purpose of evolution is to make more and more perfect. This is what the Lamarck thought, spontaneous generation. The entire process of evolution has a aim and goal. What is that purpose? That is to make the species more and more perfect. But now we know that uh, evolution has no purpose. Evolution has no purpose. Uh, but as I have told you, although this Lamarck's mechanism of change is incorrect, but he should be remembered for promoting the idea of evolution and evolutionary change. After this Lamarck, one more scientist, Charles Lane, who lived in between 1797 to 1875. He is a basically British geologist. He proposed a theory, what is known as uniformitarianism. It's a philosophy of science based on the assumption that natural processes operating in the past are the same as those can be observed operating in the present. Uh, this is a phenomenon suggested by this Charles Lie that whatever the natural processes were operating in the past, the same processes are operating even today. Uh, this is very hard to believe now, but during that period, the people agreed because they conclude that Earth was very old and has changed its form slowly over the time due to the natural process. And he said that the same natural processes which change the Earth from primordial Earth to present day Earth, the same natural forces are concluding. Uh, how he could? It was Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace, both British naturalists, whom we remember even today and appreciate their work for giving some very useful, relevant, vital ideas with respect to the organic evolution. For this, first let's try to understand about Darwin and Wallace. Then let's think about how this has helped us. Darwin basically he studied lot of things and failed everywhere. He went to study medicine also. He wanted to become a clergy in the church. Even he couldn't get a bachelor's degree also. But he was very much interested in the things that is happening in the nature. He was keenly studying the natural phenomena. He got an apprenticeship by the British government. At that time, it was a British royal government. The British royal government has commissioned a ship to undertake the voyage throughout the world to find out and to conquer different places. In this ship, Darwin was appointed as a naturalist. This ship sailed in different oceans and seas, and Darwin was collecting the information about the natural phenomenon wherever the ship sailed. He went round the world trip in the ship. By name of the ship is known as HMS Beagle. Especially his visit to a group of islands, what is known as Galapagos Island, changed his way of thinking. In Galapagos Island, which is a cluster of islands, Darwin observed the finches, the birds, and observed the tortoise in different islands. He observed that though there are different groups, each group has their own niche. What is this niche? Niche is the feeding and breeding ground. In an ecosystem, there may be number of organisms, but all of them survive provided each of them is having different niches. To give an example, in a pond, there may be different species of fishes. And these different species of fishes, some may be surface dwellers, some may be column dwellers, some may be bottom dwellers. That is, the feeding and breeding area is different. Thus, they avoid competition and each one of them get the food and breeding ground. This is what is called as niche. The same thing Darwin also observed in the Galapagos Island. Though all of them are the same group of birds, finches, each species of this group has their own feeding and breeding ground, which is not overlapping. He studied 13 different species and also found out how they are adapted to their environment, how they are adapted to the condition of each of that islands. Uh, as I have told you, Darwin's early year, if you see, he was a mediocre student during the early education. But only thing he loved animals and outdoors. In 1825, he entered Edinburgh University to study the medicine. But he was not having any appetite for surgery. He left it. He developed fondness for natural science, especially in marine geology. He didn't continue that also. He went to Cambridge to become a clergy in the church. There also he discontinued that. But as I have told you, he was having fascination for nature and natural things. Even he started collecting the beetles. During that time period, he came across a professor, Henslow. He was a professor who is interested in botany, entomology, chemistry, mineralogy, geology. He persuaded Darwin to complete the graduation and start studying the geology. Even he arranged a trip for Darwin with another colleague, that the Professor Sedgwick, in a trip to North Wales. During the same period, the captain of the ship HMS Beagle, that the Fitzroy, invited Darwin to volunteer as a naturalist on the Beagle. Beagle is a survey ship about to leave round the world, mapping and collecting expedition. Before going for this trip, Darwin read Lilly's book, that is The Principles of Geology, during the early weeks of his voyage in the ship only. Then developed interest in the geology, and he investigated the geology of the places wherever the ship visited, and he understood the slow passage of geological time also. He has also made an effort to collect the fossil bones and the animal specimens. This voyage lasted from 1831 to 1836, which visited various areas like Verde Islands, Brazil, Area, Chile, Argentina, Galapagos Island, Tahiti, New Zealand, Australia, Tasmania, Cocos Island, Mauritius, St. Helena Island. So many islands they visited during that trip. This is the photograph of the ship HMS Beagle in which the Darwin traveled. This is the route of the trip. They visited around the world, starting from various places. That is 1931 to 36, almost 5 years. Here, the spot what you see, the Galapagos Island. This is very very important for us now. It's the in the Pacific Ocean west of Ecuador. So this is the aerial photograph of this Galapagos Island. It's a cluster of island. This is the equator. On either side of the equator, you can see this Galapagos Island. Different names are given. That's one. Santa Cruz, uh, Bartolome, Santiago, like that. There are different ones. Specks of land composed of and geology is composed of basalt and the eastern Pacific Ocean. You can see this is the present day photograph, aerial photograph of this Galapagos Island. In Galapagos Island, Darwin observed that different islands were having different types of tortoises and birds, which differ from each other. Each island had its own type of tortoises and birds that were clearly different from the birds and tortoises of the neighboring island. Especially in the finches, the birds, the shape of their beak was very fascinating. They were having different types of beaks, meant for leaves, meant for birds and fruits, meant for seed, meant for collecting the grubs, for insects, different types of beaks. And bird is almost same. They all of them were the descendants of the finches of the mainland. Now, in each island, these birds were evolved independently or separately. See the finches, they are all finches. See, vegetarian tree finch, large tree finch, small tree finch, woodpecker finch, warbler finch, the cactus finch, which can suck the from the cactus, ground finch, medium ground finch. So they were basically having the tree finches were having either parrot-like beaks, grasping beaks, probing beaks, and crushing beaks. The tortoises also, the Galapagos Island tortoises, were also were different with respect to their foot and shell. See, these are the three. The foot is different here, different. It is different here. There were Galapagos tortoises were very big tortoises, but he observed that though all of them are belong to the same ancestor, now they have diversified food. So based on this, Darwin suggested that when organisms change over a time, so modern organisms descend from the ancient one. That's what he has suggested. All these birds and tortoises in the Galapagos were endemic. This type of finches were not seen anywhere else. Even today, Galapagos is an amazing place. It is the nature's open laboratory for the students of biology to learn. Animals live there are not found nowhere else on the earth. That is, they are endemic. Most famous endemics are the birds and tortoises. Here, not only finches, there were many endemics, like one penguin species, one giant tortoise species, 7 lava lizards, 14 sea cucumbers, one species of sea lion, one species of hawk, babblers. So different endemic species were there. Then during the voyage, Darwin also got a chance to observe the fossil mammals in South America. And these fossil mammals were similar yet different from the present day, especially the llamas, sloths, and armadillos. Even the finches which are living in the Galapagos Island differ from island to island, but still resemble the one which is in their mainland, that is in South America. Though there may be changes in their subtle ways. Based on all this observation, Darwin convinced with three factors. One is organisms descend with modification. Organisms descend with modification. They change with more and more modified structures from ancestors that lived during the past to present. This is the central claim of the theory of evolution. That is descent with modification. That is from ancestors to present day, which we consider the central dogma of evolution even today. Because all the present day life came from the ancestors with the modifications that we exhibit today. See, this is the Galapagos pinches arranged to show the evolutionary relationship, how they have evolved. This is this must have come to this Galapagos island from the mainland South America. From there, within these islands, they got differentiated. Some started eating the insects, so their beak got adapted for eating the insects. Some started eating berries, their beak adapted accordingly. Some started eating the nuts, accordingly, their beak adapted. Some started sucking the cactus beak you see here. Seed eaters have a short beak, whereas cactus which is having pointed and long beak. So like that, the evolution has notice that beak shape. In the photograph, just observe the beak shape, then you will understand. Varies depending on the diet, depending on their food, that varies. These are the insectivores, insect eaters, berry eaters, see the seed eaters, cactus eaters, the finches. See, this is the original photograph of some of the photographs of the Galapagos finches. After studying this Darwin, it is the time to know something about another evolutionary biologist who is the contemporary of Darwin, that is Alfred Wallace. He has come from a very modest family, but Darwin has come from a very rich family because his grandfather Erasmus Darwin was a nobleman at that time. Even Alfred Wallace was also having a very limited education. He worked in many jobs. He was a construction worker. He was a survey in the survey department. Even he was assisting a watchmaker also. Even he was teaching. But his interest was natural history and outdoor track. Then he came in contact with another naturalist, that is Henry Bates. Henry Bates traveled along with him. He traveled to Brazil, explored the Amazon, sold collection to biological specimen, especially insect. During this period in Europe, uh, people were having private zoos. So lot of people went to Amazon forest and collected different animals and sold them. So Henry Bates was also doing the same thing, and he joined. Alfred Wallace joined him, and he traveled especially in Amazon and Brazil and sold insects. So in 1848, both Wallace and Bates went to South America, gathered large collection. But unfortunately, what happens in 1952, they were coming back to England, the ship caught fire. Somehow the passengers rescued, but all the collection that they made in South Africa was lost. In Brazil, they have collected more than 14,000 species. In 1854, Wallace went to Malaya archipelago. This is the Malaya archipelago region, which is shown with the red line. It is in between Asia and Australia. And this Malaya archipelago is a biologically divided by narrow strait. Uh, it divides the up to here you will see the Asiatic fauna. Here you can see the Australian fauna. And now this is separated by what is known as Wallace Line. In this Malaya archipelago, Wallace developed his idea about the natural selection. He applied his idea, knowledge of the geological idea, to uniformitarianism, to biology. He collected insects and he placed these insects in a chart in a straight line. And he could see lot of similarities. See here. Based on that, he suggested that no species came into existence unless coexisted with another similar species that was its predecessor. That was his predecessor. What do you mean by that? No new species came into world unless it has been lived coexisted with the similar species, whom we call it as the parent species now, or predecessor. Based on that, in 1855, Wallace wrote a paper arguing for evolution of species, and he was searching for a mechanism to understand this evolution. Malthus inspired him at this time. Already the Malthusian population was there. Influenced by the Malthus, Wallace in 1858 drafted his thought and sent a letter to Darwin. By reading what Darwin has thinking, all his thoughts were shattered because Darwin and Wallace had come to the same conclusion. And they together proposed a new theory on the origin of species. Charles Darwin has written, but later he was shattered because Wallace had also come to the same conclusion. So, as a result, in 1958, a joint credit was given to both Darwin and Wallace in the Linnean Society at that time. When they announced the new theory with respect to the evolution of the organism, no scientists or the publics were attracted towards it. People thought it is one more theory. Nobody took it seriously. In 1989, Darwin started working intensively for 1 year on his manuscript, then published The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. When the same was published in a Linnean Society, it was not attracted by anything. Nobody showed any interest in that. But the next year, when Darwin wrote a book, The Origin of Species, on the same day of publication, it was sold out. Because by the time writing the book, Darwin had clarity and in mind was crystal clear about the process of this natural selection. The theory of natural selection, which has been jointly proposed by Darwin and Wallace, has three observations and two deductions out of this observation. The first observation is organisms reproduce in geometrical ratio. That's what Malthus has suggested. But now we know that reproduction is not geometrical, but it is exponential. But certainly Malthus has influenced Darwin. The second observation, number of given species tend to remain more or less constant through time. The number of individuals in any species will try to remain constant, more or less constant, I should say, over a time period. The third observation was all living things show variations. All living things. Any organism you show, they are showing variation. Based on these three observations, Darwin could come out with two deductions. One is there is a universal struggle for survival. All organisms, if they have to survive, they have to struggle. More organisms of each kind are born than can possibly obtain food and survive. That means there will be more reproduction. Possibly all of them will fail to obtain food and survive. What is known as the first deduction. There will be more organisms are born than they are fed. Then the second deduction, individuals with some kind of advantage have the best chance of surviving and reproducing their own kind. Though there are many individuals in a species, some individuals have certain better advantage. The individuals with better advantage, they have better chance of survival. When they have better chance of survival, they have the chance to reproduce of its own kind. What is this advantage? Advantage to what? Because these are very important and pertinent things in studying the evolution. With advantage, better chance for. if you want to summarize the grand contribution from the Darwin, which has been named as natural selection, some individuals are more successful because they have some better advantages. By having these better advantages, they are more successful, and when they are successful, they will reproduce more offspring than others. He also suggested that these advantageous characteristics become numerous because the animals which are having this advantageous character will reproduce more. So that's why these advantageous characters become numerous, whereas the less favorable characteristics disappear. Why? Less favorable organisms do not get a chance to reproduce. This natural selection explain how one species translate or transmutate into another species. Natural process of this can produce the new species. The new species formation or evolution is a natural process. It is because of all these things. That's what the Darwin suggested. So, in nutshell, I have explained the central dogma of Darwin Wallace concept, which is also known as theory of natural selection. But it needs lot of explanation, lot of understanding, and we will discuss about that in the next class.